Good evening, Chapter 288. Welcome to our 9th virtual EAA Chapter meeting. It's great to see you all again, because you know I can't see you. Hopefully you can see me. But again, welcome to tonight's meeting. You know, I always say turn your cell phones off. We used to do this at the meeting, so I'm trying to make it kind of feel that way. If your cell phone rings, I won't hear it, but mine might. Maybe I should turn mine off, but I hope it doesn't ring this morning this evening while I'm doing this this brief. Tonight's agenda, we got a few things of the chapter happenings. I have a national video, hopefully it'll be an interesting video to watch. Jabour is going to present a retrospective on the first day, December 17th. Today is December 17th, 1903. 117 years ago today, the Wright brothers flew the first flight. That means 17 years ago today, I was at Kitty Hawk. I don't know if many of you people went to that 100th anniversary celebration. Cold, rainy, windy, but what a blast. What a good time to be there to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the first flight at Kitty Hawk. There you are. I hope someday we can soon get back to meeting in the group again. That picture's 5 years old. We need a new picture, Roofman. But it's the people in the chapter that make this chapter so great. So hopefully we'll get together again. At least we have the World Wide Web to spread the word. So hopefully, hey Stu, if you're watching, we're thinking about you. This is my last meeting as president. It has been a real privilege to be president of this chapter. This is without a doubt the best chapter in the country. I need to thank a lot of people for their support, all of the other officers, Matt, Mike, Kelly, Bonnie and Dennis, when I first started out, Everett was treasurer. So many people who actually presented. It's not easy to do this. So for 2 years now, we've had great presenters. So thank you for all of those who did that. I've gotten a lot of emails and text messages lately too, also thanking me for what I did. So I appreciate all that. Later on, Jay Jabour is going to come up and then I'll introduce Jay, the new president. He's going to say a little bit about the future of the chapter and his visions. And I kind of wish I had a unique phrase to mark my transition, but I kind of plagiarized some, like, you know, old soldiers never die. They just fade away. The torch has been passed. I'm not a crook, because the latest one is Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Georgia, and Wisconsin were all frauds. So when I pass the torch to Jay, we'll figure out just why that all happened. A couple of new chapter members. I wish we could meet these people in person, but George Fernandez, Simon Lovely, both signed up just recently to the chapter, so someday we'll get together again and get to meet all these people. Any non-EAA chapter members who may be watching, you're welcome. Welcome to watch, welcome to participate sometime. If we ever get to meet again in person, then you're always welcome to come to our meetings. This is our website. Rick Weiss does a great job with the website. He's got the latest picture is the parking problem at the International Space Station. So EAA288.org, lots of good information on our site. You can go ahead and go to that site and see what the information is available. While I'm talking about that, you can pay the dues on the site also. Many of you have been doing that. I really appreciate that. But the dues are now, for 2021 are now due. You can pay those very easily on our website. It goes right into our checking account, so it makes things quite simple for us. The calendar, well, let's see. Not much on the calendar. The land showcase has been delayed. If you're thinking about going to the Paris Air Show next year, that's been canceled. The only thing that's on the schedule right now that's still on is that Gainesville Gator fly-in. They're still trying to do the Gainesville fly-in in March, Armed Services Appreciation Day. As far as I know, that's still on the schedule. Chapter officers for next year. Jay Jabour, president. We have 2 vice presidents, Matt Simmons, Jim Clark. Secretary Cassie Kennedy, or Cassandra Kennedy. I'm going to be the treasurer. So we're the best chapter in the country. Let's keep it that way. Let's keep this 288 spirit alive, and we'll be prosperous in the future. Home Builders Workshop put on by Headquarters, January 26th through the 30th of 2021. There's going to be several webinars different aspects of building your airplane. Charlie Becker's going to be leading that, but it's free, of course. All you got to do is log in and learn how to do certain aspects of building. Jack Lurie's doing a great job with the simulator. I always talk about the sim. It's a great resource that we have. It's right there in the hangar across from Keys. We've been using it some this month. I like to see it being used more. It's a great resource for anybody who wants to keep their instrument skills, or even what you can actually, do touch and goes in the airplane, in the sim rather. So it's a great resource. Young Eagles, as you know, we haven't had any real big gatherings here in the past 6 months or so since COVID. Individual flights are permitted. If you have a person, a young person who wants to go on a Young Eagles flight, you can do that individually. It's really easy to sign up online now, but if you need help, Jim Clark is our Young Eagles coordinator, and he does a fantastic job at this. So check with Jim and do some Young Eagles rides if you get a chance. We did, for most of the COVID briefings that we did, the virtual briefings rather, we did what's in your toy box. So this month, I didn't have a lot of submissions this month, but I did want to highlight, that's Ted Chang's RV10 in the paint shop. Right now, it's in progress right now as we speak. As you can tell, it's going to be a beautiful job. There's another look at it. It's almost complete. And that is John Starr. He's the painter who's done many airplanes, Rick Weiss's airplane, John Florent's airplane. I think he worked on Kathy's airplane. He's actually from Oregon, traveled down from Oregon, but he's going to be moving to Florida. So looks great, Ted. Can't wait to see it on the flight line and see it in the air. So congratulations on that. Here's an 8-minute video. We've all seen air shows before. This is a video from inside the cockpit of Sean Tucker. Sean was doing a practice routine at an air show he did in Houston. And the pictures are all on the inside of the airplane as he goes through his maneuvers. So hopefully you'll enjoy this video. Hopefully you'll all enjoyed that video from Sean, and as he says, he loves his job. So at this time, I'd like to bring up Jay Jabour. Jay is going to do a presentation about the retrospective on the first flight. And again, thanks to the Wright brothers, because of them, we get to enjoy what we love to do. So here's Jay. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to taking over the chapter from John. And I know he's left me a good chapter, and I know it's a great organization, so I'm glad to be here. Today, right now, what I'd like to do is a little bit different. As I looked at the calendar, I saw the date, December 17th. And it turns out this is the 117th anniversary of the first flight, the very first flight of a powered airplane. So what I'd like to do is just kind of give you a little bit of Road to Kitty Hawk. How did the Wright brothers actually get the Kitty Hawk and fly the airplane? And then I'll talk a little bit about what they did after Kitty Hawk to advance the science. Now, there's a lot of misinterpretations of what the Wright brothers have done. So what I'll try to do is just give you a little bit of context of what they were thinking and how they got to where they are. There is some intrigue, so be prepared for that. So this is a picture of the brothers. This picture was taken in about 1910. And they were really a unique pair. They had 3 siblings, 2 boys and a girl, Catherine. And the 2 brothers worked together better than anybody could really realize. What they do is they have this little technique where when they would find a problem, they would stand right next to each other, look at each other, take the other one's side, and work through the logic of what the right solution is. And they always came up with a good solution. Neither one of these brothers graduated from high school. They both were avid bicyclists. They had a bicycle shop. They made a good living with the bicycle shop. And in the late 1890s, they kind of got interested in aeronautics. And at that time, there were a lot of people that were working on aeronautics, so there was a lot of data out there, but nobody had cracked the first airplane. The Wright brothers made the single most important leap of knowledge in the science, they figured out that it wasn't a big deal to fly an airplane. It wasn't a big deal to carry a load. It wasn't a big deal to have the motor. The most important thing they worried about was the control system. They were really the first group that came up with the thought that this is really a three-axis control problem that they have to solve. People say they came to that conclusion because of their experience with bicycles, where controlling the bicycle is a big deal. This picture right here comes from their patent application that shows how they managed to control their airplane. Their patent was not for an airplane. Their patent was for a control system for an airplane. And the way they did their control was what we call wing warping. They never had ailerons on their airplane. They controlled the axis, the lateral axis of the airplane by changing the shape of the airfoil. And this is a picture that they had in their patent to explain it. Because they didn't patent the airplane, but patented the control system, they had a pretty rock-solid patent that nobody really could argue with. This airplane here is their first real successful, and it was the 1900 glider. And this is a picture of the glider. Orville did eventually fly in this glider, but it was never a free flight. It's controlled from the ground by a set of cables. Excuse me. So you notice it's a flimsy little thing. Orville did fly on this, and the glider did fly. They did this testing, and this is a picture from Kitty Hawk. They went to the Outer Banks of North Carolina because that's where they felt they got the best meteorological conditions, the right wind, the right temperature, all that. What they would do is they would leave Dayton at the end of the summer. They would go down to Kitty Hawk, they'd spend time at Kitty Hawk, come back to Dayton, and modify their designs. So to go from this design that Orville did actually write in to this design took them from 1900 to the 1901 glider. Now, when they started the design of these airplanes, there was a significant amount of knowledge that existed on how airplanes fly. The Wright brothers got all that information from the Smithsonian Institution. And they used that aeronautical information to design the shape of their airfoil, to design how the airplane flew. Turns out that was a blessing. They had a lot of data to start off with. It also turned out to be a curse because it wasn't right. The data that they got from the Smithsonian was off by about a factor of 2. It wasn't the Smithsonian's fault. They were just collecting data that other people had done. So in 1901, they took this airplane to Kitty Hawk, and their intention was to do some capture flight, just like the glider, and then to do some actual glides down the sand dunes. The problem was this 1910 glider did not carry the load that it should carry. So it was not a successful airplane. They did learn that the airplane wasn't performing like it should be performing. When they went back to Dayton, what they did was they decided that they had to develop their own data to design the airplane from, their own coefficients. And what they did was they were very innovative, more so than most people realize. First thing they did was they invented a wind tunnel. And they used the wind tunnel to test various shapes of wings, subscale. And from that testing, they realized that they did have a mistake in the data. The data wasn't right. So they took their data that they developed from the wind tunnel, and they developed their 1902 glider. So this is the glider as it looked in 1902, and this glider is actually in free flight going down the dunes at Kitty Hawk. This glider worked exactly like they had predicted. So they knew they had the airframe built. They knew they understood aeronautics. Now, it's not aeronautics like we understand it. They weren't that advanced. If you look at the wing of this glider, they don't close off the bottom of the airfoil. The airfoil is open. And that's not the most efficient way to do it. And they hadn't really figured that out yet. But what they figured out was they had a glider, all they had to do was put a motor on it and they'd have a flyable airplane. So they went back to Dayton and they sought an engine that was lightweight, had enough power that could power the airplane. And here's where one of their first animosities in the industry happened. There was a guy making engines for motorcycles who was named Glenn Curtis. They went to Glenn Curtis and they said, hey, we'd like to buy an engine from you, a motorcycle engine to put on our airplane. Glenn Curtis wouldn't sell them an engine because they didn't understand this, but Glenn Curtis was also interested in airplanes. And he realized that the rights were ahead of him. So Glenn wouldn't sell him a motor. That animosity lasted for their entire lifetime. What they did back in Dayton was they had a mechanic named Charles Taylor, that name should be familiar to most folks, who built this engine for the 1903 airplane. He built this engine completely by hand. He had a lathe, he had a drill press, and he had a big block of aluminum. He cut this engine out and machined it to the way it looks right here. Had no carburetor on it. They would spray fuel on a hot plate, which would vaporize it, get sucked into the engines. It was a very simple engine, but it was very lightweight, and it produced the power that they needed to fly their airplane. They put the engine on the airplane, went back to Kitty Hawk in November of 1903, and this is the result. This is the first flight. It wasn't as simple as it looked. They had a bunch of people down in Kitty Hawk who were locals, who were friends, who helped them out. One reason they liked Kitty Hawk was it was pretty remote and nobody would see what they were actually doing. They went down there with the airplane. They had already built a hangar, and they flipped a coin to see who'd fly first. Wilbur won. So Wilbur got the first flight in the airplane. Not so fast. Wilbur went out, went down the rail, and didn't get the airplane off the rail. So they pulled the airplane back. Orville was second in the airplane. Orville starts running down the way, and he gets the first flight. This is actually a picture from that first flight. He flew for a few seconds, didn't go very far, but he definitely was under power when he flew this. Pulled the airplane back. Wilbur got in the airplane. Wilbur flew a longer flight, pulled the airplane back. Orville did his second flight, was longer, brought it back for the fourth flight, and Wilbur actually flew for almost a minute. And it was a very successful flight. The brothers felt like they had it knocked. They had an airplane that flew. All they had to do now was refine it. Interestingly enough, they sent a telegram back to their father in Dayton, Ohio, and said, success, we flew. The Western Union office took the telegram to the Wrights, and he also took it to the Dayton Daily News, figuring this would be a newsworthy story. The Dayton Daily News looked at this and said, oh, this didn't happen, and didn't publish it. But other people did publish the same story. And they brought the airplane back after that fourth flight, and they were having a little celebration at their hangar. And a gust of wind came up, flipped the airplane upside down, and ruined it. So this airplane only flew 4 times. They did bring it back to Dayton because they knew it had historical significance. They left for Kitty Hawk for Dayton. Okay, this airplane, right, that you see here is in the Smithsonian Institution, hanging up in the Gallery of Flight. What's interesting is the airplane that's hanging up in the Gallery of Flight does not have the same fabric on it. The actual fabric, it has the same type of fabric, but when they brought the airplane back to Dayton, they left it in a warehouse. It was inundated by a flood in 1913 and it ruined the fabric. So before they would put it in the Smithsonian, They replaced the fabric with the same kind of fabric, but it's just newer. Which leads to their second animosity that happened. They knew the airplane was a historically significant item. They knew they wanted it in the Smithsonian Institution because that was the preeminent museum in the country. But when they filed their patent, the patent office didn't know anything about airplanes, so they went to the experts at the Smithsonian Institution and said, hey, did these guys really fly an airplane? And the Smithsonian Institution said, no, they didn't. Well, you have to ask yourself why. It turns out there was somebody else interested in flying an airplane, and it was a guy by the name of Samuel Langley. And you've probably seen the picture of the airplane going down on the top of a boat, gets at the end of the ramp and falls right into the ocean. That was Samuel Langley's airplane. When the patent office went to the Smithsonian and asked the question, Samuel Langley was the director of the Smithsonian Institution, and they would not recognize the Wrights as having flown the first airplane. Back in Dayton, they knew they had to do some corrections to the flyer to make it practical, and they built their 1905 flyer. And if you look, this airplane is very similar to this airplane. They're still laying on the wing. It's about the same size. After what they did to the 1905 flyer made it fly better, they decided they had the right airplane, so they started writing their patent after the 1905 airplane. They then went through a series of steps to market the airplane, if you will. And their first attempt at marketing the airplane was with the United States government. Now, the Army was the logical place to go to sell an airplane to do reconnaissance. The Army didn't quite understand that. And the Army wasn't interested in the airplane until Congress said, look at this, we think you want some airplanes. So in 1908, they had their 1908 flyer. This airplane is essentially like their Model B airplane. The pilots are no longer laying down, they're sitting up. There was room for 2 pilots. Orville took this airplane to Fort Myer, Virginia to win the Army contract. Wilbur took the same airplane over to Europe to try to sell it to the Europeans. And Wilbur actually got a lot better feeling from the Europeans than Orville did from the Americans that were here. The Army just didn't see the use for this. The first crash in an airplane was in this airplane right here, and killed Lieutenant Selfridge, an Army officer, and hurt Orville pretty badly. Orville then took the airplane back, fixed the airplane up, recovered from his injuries, brought the airplane back in 1909 to try to win the Army contract. The Army contract was very simple. It was take off, fly straight for 20 miles, turn around, come back for 20 miles, and land successfully, and do that in an hour. So that's a 40 mile per hour requirement that the Army had. There were other people that had airplanes by this time, Glenn Curtis, for example. None of those other airplanes could meet the requirements that the Wright B, the Model B did. So they actually did the flight at 42 miles an hour. It was under an hour. So they got an extra couple $1,000s from the government. Then they got their contract for $25,000 to start building airplanes for the Army. But by this time, they knew that there were other changes they had to make in the airplane. So between the 1909 contract award and when they actually delivered airplanes, the airplane did change a little bit. So here's what happened next for the Wright brothers. They won the Army contract. It was a $25,000 contract. It really set them into the commercial realm. They built a factory building in Dayton, Ohio to build these airplanes in. That's the first purpose-built airplane factory, and started building airplanes. They didn't have any idea who would buy their airplanes because there was no real commercial need for airplanes. They figured enthusiasts, playboys, people with a lot of money would buy the airplane and fly it. Unfortunately, in 1912, Wilbur died of typhus. And that was a significant emotional event for Orville on many planes. Orville and Wilbur had been inseparable for years and years and years. Wilbur was the business guy. They had formed a company in New York, a New York company. Wilbur was the business guy, and Orville was the tinkerer. They started to do their patent defense. I mean, everybody was trying to take the Wright brothers' success and use it without paying the Wright brothers royalty. They would license their patent to anybody that wanted it, but Glenn-Kurtz didn't want to pay the overhead for that. So they had to go into a patent defense, just like Steve Jobs did, just like Bill Gates did. It was no difference. And they won all those patent challenges. Unfortunately, there was a feeling in America that their patent defense adversely affected the industry in America. Because if you think of the aviation in World War I, starting in 1914, there are no airplanes flying in World War I, no American airplanes. It's all European airplanes. So Congress wrote a law that said you can't charge more than 0.5% in your royalty for airplanes. Orville was fed up with it. He was fed up with the business side of it. So in 1915, he sold the company. He sold the Wright Brothers Airplane Company and never again produced another airplane. They built some airplanes under contract. They built some SPADs and airplanes from Europe on contract, but they never built their own airplane. And then Orville became the kind of the senior person in the world on aviation, and he was wealthy. He made a lot of money, and but he would tinker. He would tinker. The injury from that crash in 1908 always dominated his life. He was always in pain. He had to do a lot of things to alleviate that pain, and he lived with that pain for the rest of his life. So let's go back to the 1903 airplane real quick, and I'll give you one more nice vignette. Since the Smithsonian Institution would not recognize him having flown first flight, they would not give the 1903 flyer to the Smithsonian. They would not do that. So they found a museum in London that was interested in it. So they shipped the 1903 flyer over to Europe in London, and it sat in the London Museum through the 1930s. In 1936, the Smithsonian Institution realized that they're missing this important asset. So they finally agreed that yes, indeed, the Wright brothers had been the first to fly. So Orville says, okay, I'm happy. We'll bring the airplane back from Europe and put it in the Smithsonian. They went to the Brits, to London Museum, and the Brits said, you know, we got this little war thing going on, and there's not a high probability if we put it on a ship that it won't get sunk by the Germans on the way to America. So we would recommend you leave it here till the war's over. So they did that. They hid the airplane in London, outside of London. When the war was over, they shipped the airplane back. Orville put new covering on it so it looked right, and then it's in the Smithsonian Institution. So that problem finally got fixed. So that's how the Wright brothers went from two bicycle guys to inventing the airplane. They had a couple of ideas that nobody else had. One of them was the controllability of the airplane was important, 3-axis control flight. That's what they actually patented. That's what they actually did. The Wrights never had an aileron on any of their airplanes. The aileron was invented by, wait for it, Glenn-Kurtz. So the Wright brothers would not incorporate, Orville would not incorporate an aileron in his airplane. That was a Glenn-Kurtz thing. They sued Glenn-Kurtz for patent infringement for the aileron, and they won that lawsuit, actually. The court said, yeah, your patent covers that kind of control system. So They never really cured that problem that they had with Glenn Curtiss. Although, if you know today's industry, Curtiss-Wright is a real company. So the companies merged, but I don't think Orville ever really got over it. And then Orville passed away in 1948. He did see the first supersonic flight. He knew that happened. And then neither brother ever had any children. They never married. So there's no direct heir to the Wright brothers. There are nieces and nephews who I've known. And that's how the Wright brothers made the first flight 117 years ago. Okay, so as we finish up the meeting here, first of all, I'd like to make sure you understand that, hey, this is the holiday season. Be safe, wear your mask, have a happy holidays. I don't know about you guys, but we're staying pretty close to the home. We're bringing the kids down, and so have a good time. Next year, when the chapter starts up again, I have an intention of having some objectives that we want to do. We will start up as virtual meetings, just like we're doing right now. It's important to me that we get to in-person meetings as soon as we can, and that'll depend on the efficacy of the vaccine, how many people take it, how long it gets rolled out, and what the state actually directs us what we can and cannot do. But my commitment is that we'll try to get to in-person meetings as soon as we can. So have a Happy New Year. Okay, we don't have a bar. You can go to your own bar. But thanks a lot for being at the meeting. We've got another little video that we think you might like. Okay, so what else can go wrong in 2020? I guess we know the answer to that now. We think 2021 will be a lot more normal year for us, so look out for all the emails. We appreciate you attending the virtual meetings, and when we get back to in-person, we'll start to socialize a little bit more than we can now.
You gonna say goodbye?
Thank you. Goodbye.
He said it. That's fine. We'll do it.